All right, let's kick it off. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, and obviously what you guys are focusing on at Sam's and with your MAP program.
Yeah, I'm going to talk to all of you since this is a lot more fun. So Harvey Vice President General Manager for Sam's Club Member Access Platform, which is our retail media business, which is part of Walmart's global advertising group. I have been in this role since July, and I've had the pleasure of being in retail media since before retail media was actually a thing. I see some familiar faces out in the crowd. I see Ann, I see Kylissa. We built this thing a long time ago. Do you remember like when at a different retailer, this was just like, hey, you've got this website, you've got some space, like go and sell it. And we're like, sell what? Like, do you remember that? And so now it's become a thing. I started my career as a buyer in retail. Sorry, I actually started my career as a mechanical engineer. Don't even ask.
What did you buy? What were you buying for?
Salty snacks, housewares. I gained 35 pounds in that job.
Are we allowed to talk about your favorite snack during that
Oh my
moment?
gosh, yeah, I can. I'm going to give a shameless plug. Cool Ranch Doritos.
Cool Ranch.
I can crush a family-sized bag. This is not a good thing. Like to this day, I have zero willpower with Cool Ranch Doritos. It's bad.
All right, we're going to dovetail for a second. So on Saturday, I went to like a chopped cooking competition in New York, and one of the secret ingredients was blue Cool Ranch Doritos.
See, I'm telling you.
And I was shocked at what they pulled off, but let's go back on script.
So back on script, started my career as a buyer where I actually was asked to go lead this digital marketing thing. And I remember the first conversation with my boss. I'm like, I've never had a digital job in my life and I've never done marketing. And she goes, yeah, you'd be perfect at this. Fast forward, Roundel was stood up and then built something at Nielsen, built something at Albertsons. Now we're building something for Sam's Club. But the benefit of that, and where I want to just talk to all of you, is this is a really, really cool journey. I love being in this space, partly because we are still trying to figure this out even now. And I think some of the questions we're going to go through are just some of the mystique, maybe like the lies that happen behind the curtain for retail media, which I'm going to share with some of you. And it's really exciting because I think it's where everyone wants to spend their money now to reach customers, consumers, members on an individualized basis, but how it's being done is so different. And so maybe that's what we can talk about today.
Yeah, let's do it. And by way of quick intro, since we just jumped right into things, Chris Fio, Chief Business Officer at Experian, so oversee revenue, strategic partnerships, and across a lot of this room, whether you're an ad tech platform, buy side, sell side, measurement, retailer, or any other category you can think of. We spend a lot of our time in the identity, audience, and outcome space, have a long-standing partnership with Walmart, amongst others in this room, and so excited to have this chat and really get your bird's eye view. Let's just jump right into the questions since we're on the shot clock. This is a newish category, if you will, although you've been doing it for 10 years, but I guess it's newish in the sense it's emerged and gone mainstream. What's working really well in the category, and where does it need to mature to kind of reach its full potential?
I'm not going to use the word standardization because you've all heard it before, but if we just break down the real, I think the real is trust and transparency. I think that's where the industry has to mature. How many of you here work for brands in this room right now? Many of you. How many of you feel like retail media has been imposed on you like a tax or a must spend or a forced barter system, and the returns coming back aren't really what you anticipate, or it's a lot of false promises and lies? I think that's where we have to get to from a maturity level standpoint. Agencies, brands, you've built these long-standing, decades-long, centuries-long relationships, and that model was working really, really well. Then this kind of new thing came in, and it promised everything out there, including guaranteed ROAS and incrementality, all these buzzwords, right? And now we're talking about standardization. Standardization is a thing because no one can figure out what the heck is actually going on, and so they're trying to level set the benchmark. But before you get to standardization, and this is my point of view.
Of course.
You got to get the trust there first. You've got people selling media now that have never sold media before in the past. You've got merchants selling media now that don't know how this ecosystem works, and they're using it as a means to gain dollars for shelf space or promotions or other things like that. That's not how it should be built. None of you bought media or built campaigns because of that. And so I think there's a long way to go. We've got to teach ad execs how to operate in the world of retail. We've got to teach retailers how to operate in the world of advertising. That maturity curve is still in its fairly nascent phases right now.
And do you think standardization will be mutually agreed upon by the RMN commerce media space, or does it require an IAB or some centralized body to actually create a direction of travel that the brands in here can understand how to work kind of seamlessly in and out of? AKA, how does the whole category not become a bunch of walled gardens?
The notion and the ideal of standardization is absolutely on point. The reality of it is that the methodologies, even the signals you collect, are so vastly different. Even a centralized governing body is going to have a very tough time doing that because the level of measure is so different. I'll give you an example. At Sam's Club, we measure everything through what we call member deterministic data. Like, this is the beautiful thing about working at a club is the members have to scan their ID to buy anything. And so for me, it's actually quite easy to provide one-to-one closed-loop attribution. And that's a luxury that we have. Many others have to extrapolate or create lookalikes or doppelgangers, those kind of things. That's hard. That's really hard. What if you pay with cash? The coolest thing about being a member is you can dump a jar of nickels on the cashier. We still know who you are. You have to scan your ID. Cash is tough. Gift cards are tough. That's where this is going to get really hard. Like, how do you, it's not just the measurement methodology. How do you standardize how people pay? How do you standardize how you resolve identity? How do you even standardize what clean room or what data you use? And so maybe I'll turn the question back on you as a company who you're the experts in identity and measurement and data. Like, what's your take on that whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point. I think it's difficult. I love that you use the word signal. A lot of folks underestimate the differentiated data sets and what each of the retail media networks or publishers, for that matter, what type of consumer data they have, both in terms of the breadth and depth, right? Do you have declared PII? Do you have anonymous users at a variety of different touch points? How frequently are you seeing those consumers? So I do agree, the normalization of that data set, trying to look across, will be very difficult since everyone has a different view of the same consumer, us as individuals, while we're shopping across a myriad of different stores and product sets. One thing we're starting to see more and more of is a little bit of collaboration between the respective identity spines so that there's at least interoperability between an Experian, a TransUnion, a LiveRamp, go down the list, so that regardless of if you're a brand and you have a view of your customer and a retail media or a publisher that has a view of their customer, it creates a cohesive approach from a collaboration standpoint. I think that's going to help move the needle, but to get to full standardization, I think to your point, it'll be both a challenge and I think wishful thinking, but over what period of time to see it come to fruition is probably the big question, likely to be determined.
And I think that word is what many use to get on a stage and talk to folks like you to make you feel better about what I talked about first, which is this trust thing. Like, we want to standardize. Yeah. If we talk to your data teams, maybe not. That's the reality I think that we're talking about, and that's why I want to distill this in a real honest dialogue. I think what folks in charge of revenue say on a stage to all of you versus how your working teams actually interact in those environments where that's not something that they're really keen on. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the maturity curve that we're talking about, that we're not there yet.
But I think with infrastructure, cloud, the ability to share data, we can get there, right? If this was 10 years ago, borderline impossible, where we are and where we're going, I think we can. And it will be feasible for any data science, BI, engineering team to actually be able to accomplish that. But if you said tomorrow, absolutely not. We're very far away from that.
Agreed. And then we're going to have the second phase of what I think is my prediction, is once you have that data accessible to you, let's just say we get to that promised land, you're actually going to see how good or bad the quality of the data is, and that's going to bring in a whole different challenge. So stay tuned for maybe Brand Innovators Part 2 next year.
And the willingness for perceived data sets that are more or less valuable than what I think the market truly understands, and also how sometimes the best data doesn't actually perform to meet your campaigns versus adding in other elements. So data is a unique and fickle thing. But let's pivot just a little. So you guys have obviously built a robust platform and offering. What is working really well for the brands out here when they're looking to engage with a Sam's, or just in general in this category? Like, what do you define as kind of the key successes for a marketer running media across these categories?
Yeah, here's some things that I would actually share. So the way you transact with a grocery retail media network, or a travel retail media network, or a financial services should be very different than how you transact with a club retail media network. They all behave very differently. And so I think the things that work really well are when you actually use retail media in the way that retailer's core value proposition is. And so I would ask you all a question, maybe some early audience engagement. Why do members or why do consumers choose to shop at a warehouse club versus a grocery store? or a drugstore? What thoughts, what words come to your mind? Value. Bulk. What else? Anything else? Treasure hunt.
The samples.
Samples. So all these things boil down into what we call the Sam's Club Diamond. 4 things that we base everything off of in how we build our retail media network, which is different than how I build others.
I was going to say, yeah, I'd love to hear how it's different too.
So value, trust, experience, assortment. Those 4 things. I mean, you've got to remember that members pay us a fee, like for the privilege to shop here. So the ads that we build have to be very different, very, very different. So if you think of things through that context, that's how you should think of how you interact with other retail media networks that are out there in the space, because they will be very different in terms of the assets they provide for you. So search here is very different than search at mass. Display here is very different than display at a drugstore. I would urge brands to really consider like the ethos of the retailer they're working for, and I actually think that's the biggest miss that brands have is they want a standard. They want that ROAS metric to be exactly the same. They want that metric of success to be exactly the same. And I hate to tell it to you, like it's not. So.
Yep. So then you guys are maturing, right? Both the category and your go-to-market approach. Grocery, retail obviously makes sense. What about the non-endemic categories? How is that progression evolving? What's working, what's not working? How do you even accomplish that to sell to Ford or sell to Sony PlayStation when that's not on your shelves?
Let me hear your opinion first. I was going to ask you this question, Chris.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell me what you think about non-endemic advertising at a retail media network, and I'm going to answer with some of the things that we're doing here that I think are quite unique.
All right. Well, one, I've never sold ads in my life. I wear that as a badge of honor. I've lived in the data and identity space my entire career, but we do work with a number of different retail media, commerce media, and again, even publishers. If you put your Paramount and your Disney hat on, it's the very similar opportunity. Highly engaged, high value audience. How can you understand their intent? Obviously, are you in market for a new BMW or coming off of a lease? Very rarely am I going to go buy a car through Sam's Club, so I think it's obviously augmentation with best-in-class signal and data that you can connect to that. There's obviously digital signal that we see from the car gurus and alike, and there's offline data sets that companies like ourselves have access to, right? Our PII tied to the DMV record that then says, Chris or Ann, they have a BMW. They bought it 4 years ago. I think the ability to connect that into data sets like your own so that you can enable that type of targeting to live in your environment, on-site or off-site, is certainly one of the behaviors that we're seeing as you look to expand categorically. And then obviously it requires best-in-class measurement to be connected to that so you can actually prove the efficacy, since the main reason folks buy from you is, like you said, that our return on ad spend. So how can you ensure that if it's a non-endemic product, you have that same reporting capability, or at least its nearest neighbor, since you're not owning the full consumer life cycle?
That was a really smart answer.
It was my question. If I can't answer, I'm in big trouble.
Let me show what we're talking about when we talk about non-endemic at Sam's Club, because it's actually really, really fun, really fun. In our Grapevine, Texas store, which is our latest club opening, we took all the cashiers out of that club. So if you walk in right now, you won't see anybody checking you out because the entire club is what we call scan and go enabled. I'll show you a little bit of a video of scan and go, and I want to be really clear, scan and go is not the same as self-checkout. I will talk about that a little bit later. But what do we put in place of the cashiers in Grapevine? We parked a $125,000 Mercedes literally on the floor. And I'll tell you, for that particular advertiser, it wasn't about selling the number of vehicles on the club floor. The number of engagements that we got, whether it be through clicks, whether it be through AR, whether it be through the QR. I mean, people wanted to imagine their families in that car. You should see how many people just like sat in that, wanted to smell the leather, wanted to touch the steering wheel, wanted to imagine their family inside of it. I mean, engagements through the roof. And so for us, non-endemic advertising is quite simply what we're trying to create is retail theater. 2 words, like making shopping fun is something we try to do. We did another one with the NFL. We had a tailgate event right in front of our club. Your kids could go throw footballs and kick field goals in Kansas City, and we happen to have some of the players come and sign autographs. Like that makes shopping fun. and the ability for us to measure that engagement at the brand level and then tie that to maybe a conversion or maybe not. Maybe it was just engagement with no conversion, but why? I think that's where non-endemic advertising should be going versus right now.
Yeah.
Third-party post-checkout banners that happen to give you rev share on a click. Like, that's not great non-endemic advertising. It does bring in money to the platform, but I don't know, not great.
It's actually the first I love the concept. You said retail theater. Interesting. How do you pick Grapevine, Texas, of all the places?
So for those of you who have been to Grapevine before, that was a club that was actually destroyed by a tornado not too long ago. And Sam's Club is a member-based warehouse club. We listened to the feedback of our members. The members in that community, we probably got, I'm not even exaggerating, 100,000 emails like weekly, monthly, annually saying, can you open this club back up? And so when we open it up, we're like, how do we open this up in a way that's bigger, badder, better, more fun than ever before? And so we thought, let's open this up and make it fully digital. And our investors, our board, are like, what do you mean fully digital? Well, fully digital. I mean, it is literally, our Scan and Go adoption in that club is 98% right now. The only 2% that don't are cash, which is okay. You can still come in and pay cash, but digital only.
What's the future of this digital only versus self-checkout? Like, what does that look like in 12, 24, 36 months for you guys or for the category? Do you think this is gonna be a common theme?
I have been called the devil before at Sam's Club when I do walkthroughs with members because some don't want to move digitally. And I think that's the biggest learning for me is, I'm trying to make this experience frictionless for our members. Scan and Go is great because you walk in, you load your cart, you can scan as you go, your family can scan as they go, and you just walk out. You don't have to wait. It's not self-checkout. Self-checkout means you have to unload it all again, scan your barcode, load it back in again. I mean, learning these lessons, though, through Member Walk Along, I do know that there are folks who don't want that full digital experience because there are a lot of people that have told me, like, I love interacting with your associates. Like, this is the best part of my day, to talk to so-and-so at the membership desk. And so I think the blend of the two. I have gone back on, I think full digital penetration, but serving members the way they want to be served, I think, is more of the sweet spot. But I will tell you that growth, though, is absolutely explosive right now. So we will still lean very heavily into digital tools and tech that enable that frictionless checkout experience.
Awesome. We're getting close on time. So one last question before we open up for one or two questions from the audience. Can, on the horizon, obviously a lot of tentpole announcements take place from every publisher, buy-side, sell-side tech in the ecosystem. Any major prediction of what you think's in store in 60 days from now, 90 days?
Well, I can't spoil all of the surprises, but I will tell you this. I think that in-club sophistication will rival digital this year for Sam's Club.
I'd love a Sam's Club pop-up in Cannes because buying the toiletries that I forget is also not easy in French. So game on. Let's open it up to the crowd for one question. I think we're down to 2 minutes. Gentleman in back.
Jason from Brand Innovators, thank you for being here. How do you bring in younger customers?
How are you bringing in younger customers?
How do we bring in younger customers? So that retail theater has been, from our stats and our studies, the number one thing that actually drives a younger demographic into a warehouse. I mean, if you think about it, a college student has a tough time shopping at club because they don't need a gigantic or lifetime supply of Tide. However, there are things that they do there that I would say engage them in other ways. So that NFL event that we talked about, that tailgating event, the number of younger demographics that skewed towards that because they got to meet a player or do something or taste something, smell something. Essentially, the 5 senses we're trying to employ here. So it's not just sight and sound anymore. Sight and sound being, everyone's talking about in-store media being screens. We've got those. We've got screens everywhere, Sam's Club. How do you taste it? How do you smell it? How do you feel it? How do you interact with it? That is what we've shown to attract that younger demographic because we've also been told that they value experiences, which is why we're creating experiences for them.
One more. How do you scale it? Those retail experiences, like mobile versus scale?
I think there's a magic in having both. There are certain local community events that we know are local to that specific community where that event will do better than a scaled national back-to-class event. So I think it's a combination of both.
All right. Well, we are at time. I know we both have things to run to, but thank you guys for having us, Brand Innovators.
Thank you all.
Cheers.